If I were to write a sequel to the 4, I would call it the 1, and it would be about Amazon. Everywhere that Amazon bumps up against the others, it's winning. It's winning in products. We think of Apple as the most innovative product company in the world, but the most innovative product of the last 5 years isn't the Apple Watch or even the Apple AirPods. It's Amazon's Echo, where they bump up in media against Apple and Google and Facebook. Amazon Media Group is now growing faster than Facebook or Google, where they bump up against Amazon or Netflix in video. Amazon used to be number 7 in terms of market share of primetime streaming video in the US. 1 year later, they're number 3. So everywhere Amazon bumps up against the other 3, it's winning. Amazon is the most dominant company in the world right now.
Solid rocket ignition and liftoff. Liftoff of Endeavour on America's 50th space shuttle flight.
We know a lot about the engineering for going to Mars, right? We know a lot of those things. We have to refine it and do other things. And it would be incredible. But the reality is, again, it doesn't push us. When you try to go to another star, all of a sudden, even if you're going 1/10 of the speed of light, you're going to need 50 years or more to even just get to our closest neighboring star. You have to have incredible amounts of energy to be able to do that. Energy we cannot generate right now. We cannot generate enough. But if you started to look at how do we generate, do fission safely and store it and generate it, fusion or antimatter, then all of a sudden we change things. We start to look at how do you create the right materials. You change things, right, that are sustainable. If you start to look at error detection, understanding enough about the human microbiome and in the soil so that you can grow food, and you can go on and on. A human behavior and human systems, it makes a difference. And just think, if we just go a small step of the way in any of that, it starts to change our world today. And in fact, so much of what's needed for human interstellar flight are the very same things that are required for us to survive as a species on this planet.
It didn't used to be the case that you could get a burger or a nugget or a bunch of chicken nuggets for €1 or €2. Back in the 19th century, English workers were paying 80–90% of their income on food, and so now that we pay merely 20%, something's changed. And the chicken nugget ends up being a fantastic way of showing all the ways that capitalism dodges its bill in one small strange thing. So let me run through the 7 things. Number 1, it's cheap nature, which means we feel free to take a chicken from the wild and breed it so that it is basically a machine for producing meat. That approach to nature is indicative of how capitalism operates. The second thing is work, because to turn a chicken into a nugget, you need to exploit workers, and chicken and poultry workers around the world are paid very badly, no matter where they are. The third thing is cheap care, because once the chicken workers' bodies are broken, who's going to look after them? Usually it's gendered women's work, it's community work to look after these broken bodies, and you can't have cheap chicken without a safety net for the people you discard from that production line. The fourth thing you need is, in fact, cheap food. The chickens need to be fed. In the United States, they're given billions of dollars of subsidy every year just for the feed alone, and cheap food is also vital for workers. On top of that, you need cheap energy in order to fuel the poultry production facilities, to be able to run the machinery. You need cheap money, because in order for the engine of capitalism to work, you need low interest loans, and big business get low interest loans from governments all the time. And finally, you need cheap lives, because no matter how little you pay workers and how little you care about consumers, at some point you have to recognize that it's women and people of color who are discriminated against in the production of this food. And then, of course, you can treat your consumers as disposable too. If they develop dietary diseases as a result of eating your food, that doesn't matter so much, because that's not a life you have to care about.
I think the closer we look the more what I was calling salvage accumulation is everywhere around us. That the cuts of meats that most Westerners eat exclude most of the body of the animal, and we just throw that away, and that the kinds of stuff that we're leaving behind is going to have to be some of what our future resources are. I mean, I think this should not foreclose also trying to take care of the environmental spaces that we have before we lose them all. But we are creating ruins as quickly as we can, and we had better hope that there's something useful and alive in those ruined spaces.
To look at how the school system works, one of the problems is that often the curriculum is very narrow, and creativity shows itself in all sorts of different disciplines, and we can have different capabilities in different disciplines according to our own natural talents. So for example, if somebody has a natural capacity for design or for music, but they don't get the opportunity to learn music or design at school, they may never discover their creative capacities in that area. Secondly, creativity involves making mistakes, trying things out. It takes time for ideas to grow and develop and gestate. But if a school system doesn't encourage that, if a school system actually discourages making mistakes, if you get penalized for appearing to be wrong about something, then that tends to stunt that particular capacity. And the other is that it's one thing for a teacher to see their role as the direct transmission of ideas and information, and that's a very important part of teaching. But to encourage people to think differently, you need to give them space to try their own ideas out, for students to be able to explore their own curiosity. There's been such a pressure on schools for standardization, for testing, for not making mistakes, that these conditions tend to be inhibited in schools, and it's a big concern of mine that we should address that.